Man, are we back? Am I back now? Did I fall off entirely there while I was just going on a fucking rant? That's very dumb. That's super duper dumb. Alright, let's refresh the chat here. Okay, are we back? How long have I been streaming while offline with my fucking internet that just dropped? Anyway, hi, welcome. My name's James. I'm gonna start recording now, so that we can just get through this video. Week 7 looks pretty good. I need to get some things set up over here on my screen so that we can take a look at all the normal things we talk about. But yeah, anyway, I'm gonna start recording, so I'm gonna go back to the starting soon thing. I'll be back in a sec. Okay, yo, what's up? My name is James McCool. I'm the owner of PaydiRtDFS.com, and I've already gone through all the spiel for the people who have been in the chat. But thank you guys so much for tuning in. We're going to talk about NFL Week 7 DFS. Looks like a pretty good week. If you have questions, feel free to leave them in the chat, whichever way the chat is on my screen. And let's go ahead and kind of get started. Can we talk about League of Legends slate now that we're live? No, we can't. Maybe after. I still need to run League of Legends tonight. I was supposed to do it before the stream, but shit happens. You just subbed. You always watch my showdowns. Thank you. I appreciate that. I do want to continue to do more showdown videos. I like the showdown videos. People like the written articles, though, because it's easier to get through. And, like, I'm pretty sure that people like the written articles because they can just go to, like, my thoughts at the bottom and, like, not care at all about like the actual breakdowns I do of like capping the flex and stuff like that. But you know, whatever's clever. It doesn't matter, I guess. All right, let's see. Let's get some things set up here. So we are going to want to take a look at the contest sims, the pivot finder, the stack finder. Actually, you know, we never really use the pivot finder on this show. It's just not as necessary, but we do use the optimizer for sure. All right, so let's start with, so for those of you who do not know and have not tuned in, first off, welcome. Secondly, what we usually do is we'll go over the macro stuff. We're going to take a look at team totals, game totals, stuff like that. And then we're going to move on to contest simulations and the range of outcomes and the stack finder and stuff like that. So we can break down and say, you know, where do we really want to focus on the slate? Most people will make a big mistake when it comes to DFS where they just try to focus on everything all at once. And that just doesn't work. You know, that's not something that is super fruitful when it comes to DFS in general. You should be focusing on the best spots that you can and not getting too far off the board. So let's go ahead and start with the macro data. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in here on the right. We're going to be taking a look at team totals and such. So the best team total overall this week is going to be on Philadelphia, Miami. That's the showdown slate for tomorrow. It looks like it should be a banger. Game total is 51.5, which is obviously really, really good. I do have my concerns that Philadelphia has looked, not incredible. Like, their offense has looked pedestrian for the most part. So I'm a little bit worried about that. Miami can be beaten as well if the defense is able to get to Tua. But for the most part, you know, that game should be really, really good. The highest game total on the slate is the Chargers versus the Chiefs. So it makes sense. The Chiefs are 5.5-point favorites. Chargers offense has been terrific. Justin Herbert is having some career high marks in terms of efficiency this year. They don't have Mike Williams. It's going to be Joshua Palmer again, but Palmer has shown that he is more than good enough to fill into that role. Kansas City, they picked up Mecole Hardman off of waivers. Was it off waivers? I don't actually know if it was off waivers, but they picked up Mecole Hardman, and that just, you know, it adds another mouth to feed in that offense. There are 10 players in that offense that have at least one target on the year, and typically there's like 7 to 9 guys that are involved in the game plan each week. So Kansas City always hard to stack. But Travis Kelce is there. Travis Kelce is pretty good. So I like to use that. That game should be really, really popular. The Chiefs expect the Chargers to be the most popular stack on the slate, I think. And that makes sense. I wrote them up in my Fantasy Life article. Denver and Green Bay. This is a game that I don't think people are really going to pay that much attention to, but they should. Russell Wilson has been better than advertised. And like, this is something that is kind of a hot take, but I think Russell Wilson has been good this year. When you go and you look at the stats for him this year, I'm actually going to pull them up so I can like speak through a couple of them because I did write about this a little while ago. But Russell Wilson this year, so last year he was really, really bad, right? Broncos were 4-11. He had 32 attempts per game. He had a 60% completion percentage. This is last year. 60% completion percentage, 3.3% touchdown rate, 2.3% interception rate, success rate of 2.41, average net yards per attempt of 5.54. Okay, and a sack rate of 10%. So those are pretty bad, right? This year, Broncos are 1-5, but their offense is better by a long shot. They're scoring 21 points per game, I think, so far this year. Attempts at 31 per game, but the completion rate is 66% for Russell Wilson, so considerably better. The touchdown rate is 6.5%, so nearly twice as good as last year. Interception rate is staying the same, but he has a 2-to-1 touchdown interception ratio, almost 3-to-1. The success rate, so the success rate for Russell Wilson last year was only 2.41%. This year it's 6.95%. Russell Wilson has been much, much, much more effective. They're not passing as much, and the offense as a whole just seems like it's not super well constructed. Like, they're not getting their playmakers on the field. There's the whole Marvin Mims thing where, like, Marvin Mims should be on the field more than somebody like, I don't know, Brandon Johnson. Like, there's no reason why Marvin Mims shouldn't be on the field. But overall, like, Russell Wilson has been much better this year. Now, granted, he is not having, like, his career years, but, like, if we go back and look at his stats from, say, 2019 for Seattle, right? He had a 66% completion percentage. This is in 2019, right? They went 11-5 this year. 66% completion percentage, same as this year. 6% touchdown percentage. He has a 6.5% touchdown percentage this year. The average net yards per attempt was higher at 6.72, but I think that's more a consequence of the offense itself. Russell Wilson's QB rating this year is 99, which is not bad, right? Like, it was 105 in 2019. So Russell Wilson's been good this year, and I think that's worth saying, especially because Green Bay is a team that can be passed on. And Jordan Love, I think, is another QB that has actually been relatively good. Why am I spending so much time talking about fucking Denver Green Bay? I'm interested in this game. Overall, I think that both of these QBs have gotten a bad rap. Jordan Love has shown to be really good at times this year as well. This game has shootout potential by a long shot, and I think needs to be focused for sure. Anyway, before I keep ranting about this game, let's go ahead and keep jumping down. We have Arizona-Seattle. This one is going to be relatively popular, over-under of 44.5. Seattle are big favorites, 8.5-point favorites. But overall, people are going to be interested in this game. There's been a lot of chatter about Geno Smith. There's been plenty of talk about DK Metcalf and how his hip hurts. I think that there is plenty of reason to think that this game has good potential. All of that said, like, Arizona has not been competitive in their last couple of games, and their projected pass touchdowns is pretty low. Their projected total touchdowns overall is pretty low, just 1.9. So, yeah, I get it. I like Seattle, but I like Kenneth Walker. I think he's really good chalk instead of Seattle stacks. It just kind of depends on which side has more ownership. I know that Kenneth Walker is going to be really high owned, but Seattle stacks just probably don't interest me as much as Charger stacks, Kansas City stacks, Green Bay stacks, Denver stacks. We'll get to some other stacks. Like, I really like Ram stacks as well. So we'll get there as well. Minnesota San Francisco is off of this slate, I believe. I think. Is it? I don't remember seeing them. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's off the slate. Yeah. Then we have the Pittsburgh and Los Angeles Rams. This game, I really, really like the Rams. I wrote up the Rams as another stack that I think is really, really important over at Fantasy Life. And when you look at the range of outcomes, like the projection for Stafford, Kupp, Puka Nacua is just ridiculous. It is by far the highest on the slate at nearly 61 points. Nacua and Cooper Kupp combined for like 85% of the air yards last week, and a good 50+% of the targets as well. They can absolutely support 2 wide receiver ones in this offense. They're both top 10 in utilization. They are very, very good plays overall. I'm really going to like Ram stacks. The problem is Pittsburgh sucks, dude. And I don't know how interested I am in stacking the Rams and bringing it back with Pittsburgh. So I don't know. I just think that when you look at how good Matthew Stafford has been this year in terms of his passing efficiency, the touchdowns just have not come through, but he's got like a career low passing touchdown rate. And I just think that that's a really, really good spot to utilize. I think it's going to be relatively popular, but I don't actually know that for sure because it is expensive, right? Like 23.6 is expensive for a stack. So I'm not sure how popular it's going to be, especially because there are just not that many values. When we go to running backs and we sort by values, Jaylen Warren on the other side of this game, right? He is looking like the best value. And then it's like Rachaad White. People hate playing Rachaad White. Models like him. Ramondre Stevenson. People hate that. There's not that many values when it comes to running backs. So getting a Ram stack is going to be hard unless you do go with Jaylen Warren and Rachaad White, which, newsflash, you probably should. Especially because Jaylen Warren, he gets there on passing volume, and we expect the Rams to be ahead. So really like the Rams. Outside of that, Detroit and Baltimore is another game that we have here. I did see that Lamar Jackson was going to be relatively popular this week, but I don't know how much I like that. Let's see. So that's a 43 over-under. We have 41 over-under with Indianapolis and Cleveland. Cleveland is another team that I'm kind of interested in. Their defense is really, really good. I haven't looked at Jerome Ford's rushing work share. I suppose I can. Let's go look at this. So if you guys don't know, you should go use Fantasy Life. I manage the data pipeline for them, and they're really, really good. So let's go ahead and take a look at what Jerome Ford's workload has been. So 52% of the rushing attempts, 35% of the routes, 11 PPR points. I mean, he has not been bad. Double-digit fantasy points in 4 straight games since he took over as like the lead guy, right? RIP Nick Chubb, but he has not been bad overall. Kareem Hunt did have 16 fantasy points in week 6. Only 9% of the targets, though. Like, the workload has been better for Jerome Ford, and he's probably the guy that you want. And he's cheap, right? He's another one of those guys where when we're looking for value so we can fit, like, Ram stacks, he does pop up then. So he's relatively cheap. And they also, I'm pretty sure, probably have a pretty decent run touchdown expectation. Yeah, okay, 1.03. It's not the best, but it's only really behind like San Francisco, Miami, and then Philadelphia. So Baltimore and Seattle are here on the slate, and then Detroit is here on the slate, and then Cleveland is number 4. So that's not too bad. And then outside of that, you start getting into these totals that are 40, and it's like outside of Buffalo is kind of the only other team that I'm really, really interested in. Like, it's just pretty gross down here. I don't really want to stack Tampa Bay. I'm not going to stack Atlanta. Washington is interesting only because they have such a high passing expectation, right? Like, the dropbacks for Washington is really, really high. 40.5 is really high. And they're cheap enough to get away with a team total of 20, but I'm not super into it, I don't think. So yeah, overall, it's a pretty short list. The team totals are just not that good this week. When the highest team total on the slate is just 47.5, and then it drops all the way down to 45 with Green Bay, Denver. It's just not a great week for upside. So I think that what that really means, and like the main thing that I think people should take away from this, is that it's important not to overpay for stuff like this, right? Like, it's important not to overpay for something like a Seattle stack if they were all healthy, or a Ram stack. Like a Ram stack, it's expensive for an over-under of 44. Now, again, Ike, like you just said, overs can hit for sure. If you think that the over is going to hit in a game, for sure you should be stacking it. But, well, not for sure you should be stacking it, but it's an option, right? If you think games are going to go over, then you should consider that. But based on over-unders and based on where the biggest totals are, like, you just got to be careful of not overpaying for things. Salaries matter when it comes to this kind of stuff. So just be careful with that stuff. Let's see. Did James just say he's not sure if he likes Lamar? I was big on Lamar last year, and like he still projects well, right? But Baltimore's wide receivers fucking suck. They suck. Like, it would be one thing if we had this this air raid offense or whatever, and the receivers were good, but they're so bad. So far for the year, Baltimore's 4-2. They should legitimately be like 5-1 or 6-0. They kind of threw away 2 games. That loss against Pittsburgh was fucking inexcusable, right? But overall, like, even with that game, Lamar Jackson has a 70% completion rate. 70%. And just a 2.9% touchdown rate. All right, so a 2.9% touchdown rate is the lowest of his career. Typically, we see good quarterbacks somewhere in the 5% range. His average for his career is 5.8%. His touchdown rate is low. The main problem with Lamar Jackson this year has been that, like, he has not had the same per game rushing stuff. And that's really where his floor and ceiling lies. And he just hasn't had the same yards per attempt. He's only at 5.5 yards per attempt this year. He's still doing okay. But his yards per game is only 54.5. 2022 it was 63. 2021 it was 63. 2020 it was 67. 2019 it was 80. 80 rushing yards per game in 2020 or in 2019. So we'd like to see a little bit more rushing, but like his receivers just are not very good. And I think that the attempts, let's see, what are the attempts this year? Well, actually, no, he's still attempting about the same. Man, maybe I should be higher than Lamar. Why did I not feel like Lamar was a good option here? He is. Like, Baltimore is a fine option. I would like to see a little bit more rushing. I'd like to see a little bit more success in the rushing. He has not been as effective, and that happens as rushing quarterbacks continue to age, right? Like, the efficiency goes down. But he's got 10 attempts per game. Maybe this is the game, right? Right, dudes? And overall, like, when you look at team stacks, Baltimore does not look super great. Baltimore projects for 45, but when you look at the rest of the stacks, it's like, overall, we're not having that many over 50 anyway, so maybe I should be higher on Lamar. You're right. Maybe I should be higher on Lamar. And I wasn't, and that's a mistake on me. Let's see, what's the beverage today? This is a whiskey barrel aged red. I don't remember what it's called, but it's one of my favorites. The whiskey barrel aged ones are just terrific. They have this really sweet, like, cherry note at the end of it. It's just really, really good. How would I stack Baltimore if I were to do it? Well, let's take a look. So, overall, let's just take a look really quick at the stacks, and then I'll go take a look at the stack finder really quick. But Ram stacks by far the top. Buffalo, Rams, Chargers, Kansas City, Buffalo. I really like Buffalo stacks this week. It's just kind of like when you see this large of a gap and this small of a gap, it's like, I don't know if I want to go Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, Gabe Davis, when for $600 more, I can have 10 more points in median, almost 11 more. Yeah, actually 11 more points in median, and have, a higher upside stack, right? So, the question would be, is Buffalo going to be in a more competitive game? And the answer is no, they're even bigger favorites than the Rams are. So, I don't know, 6-point difference, not a super huge fan of that. But Buffalo stacks do make a better stack than Charger stacks, I think. And Charger stacks are going to be much more popular than Buffalo stacks. So, overall, this kind of list, Rams, Bills, Chargers, Chiefs. And then we get into this Detroit-Baltimore game, and then I do really, really like a Denver stack as well. I think Denver-Green Bay is going to be really, really good. But all that said, the question was, how do I figure out what stack I want to do with Baltimore? And the answer is using a stack finder. So we'll go over here. We're going to go QB plus 1. And, usually I end up going with a one-man stack with Baltimore because he just doesn't have enough volume, right? Like, he's only attempting 28 passes per game, 20 completions per game. There's just not enough volume there for Baltimore stacks. It's kind of the same way that I feel about Buffalo stacks usually. This year you have been able to get away with Buffalo too. But typically, like, with Baltimore stacks, you're just skinny stacking. You're never double stacking. The volume is just not there. And the passing yardage is just not there. He's only averaging 208 yards per game, which is higher than his average. But that's only because in 2018, his yards per game was so low. His average since then has been somewhere in this low 200s range. So you just go with a one-man stack here. And then we're going to go ahead and run stack analysis. I don't know if Baltimore's going to show up here. Yeah, they're not, because they don't project better than Buffalo or Detroit. But if we wanted to see specifically how we're going to stack Baltimore, we can go ahead and go over here. We can select Baltimore, and then we can run stack analysis. And we can say, all right, well, what are the stacks that we can use? So Lamar Jackson with Zay Flowers is the best overall. It's also the highest owned. And then we have Lamar Jackson with Mark Andrews. The projection is 3 points less. The price is the same, but you do end up getting with 6 points less ownership. Frankly, the ownership doesn't matter here, really. Lamar Jackson and Zay Flowers is fine. Then we have a significant drop from Lamar Jackson to Nelson Aguilar, but obviously also a significant drop in ownership. I would be sticking to these top two overall. This is Lamar Jackson with Flowers or Mark Andrews. But I'm fine with any of that. If you wanted to go QB plus 2, you can. You can run stack analysis on Baltimore and see what comes up. The best overall, obviously, is Zay Flowers, Mark Andrews. The second best is Zay Flowers with Aguilar. And then the third best is Zay Flowers with Rashad Bateman. So anything that's really going to be built around Lamar Jackson and Zay Flowers, that's just kind of where you go. Zay Flowers has much higher upside than any of the other wide receivers. And as far as, like, price and upside of ADOT goes, he's just a better play than Mark Andrews. Plus, you kind of want to save tight end this week for either a premium option with Travis Kelce or a punt with Tyler Higbee. Usually, yeah, I would like to correlate with my quarterback, and for sure you can play Mark Andrews with Lamar Jackson, but I think that there are better tight end options, like tight ends in better spots than there are wide receivers this week. So while we get ready to look at the range of outcomes, I'm going to go over here. I'm going to start a sim. We're going to start a sim of a average field. Actually, let's go ahead and go with sharp field for small field. I'm going to be playing qualifiers tomorrow. I only really get to play one contest this week because DraftKings still has not fixed my deposit limits, and I am still mad about it. Let's go check my email and see if they fixed it. They haven't. I fucking hate them. But let's go ahead and start a sim here, and then we'll take a look at the range of outcomes. So we already kind of went over team stacks here. It's mostly Rams, Bills, Chargers, Chiefs. You do get down into this Detroit, Baltimore, and then when you sort by 4X, you do end up seeing some Pittsburgh, Arizona, Washington. I mean, Washington looks like an okay stack as well. And then kind of like the loins play is going to be Denver. I just think that Denver-Green Bay game has good upside in terms of the QBs being too cheap, right? Russell Wilson at 5,400 represents probably the best value on the slate outside of Kenny Pickett at 5K. But I think this game environment is really good. And we've been talking a lot about the Rams. Kenny Pickett has not looked good, but if he's 5K and nobody's going to play him, a Pittsburgh stack with Deontay Johnson back and bringing it back with either Cooper Kupp or Puka Nacua seems pretty good. You could actually, a fun one would be if you were to go with Kenny Pickett, Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp, Deontay Johnson, and George Pickens, right? And say, all right, if this game's really going to be a shootout, I'm going to take the cheaper quarterback. And then get all the upside from the Rams offense, which comes almost entirely from Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp, and then stack with Kenny Pickett with George Pickens and Deontay Johnson, now that Deontay Johnson's back, and get the cheaper quarterback in what you hope is a shootout so that you can get all of the upside from the Rams. And that's probably the way that you should go. It just makes a lot of sense to go with things that way. Outside of that, I do really like Russell Wilson. I think that Russell Wilson and Jordan Love are both totally fine options. Jordan Love getting a little bit more ownership because people think Denver's offense or defense is just the worst. But I think both of them are good plays. Let's go ahead and zoom in here on some running back stuff. So in terms of running backs, the highest ownership looks like it's going to Kenneth Walker and then Isaiah Pacheco. I'm surprised that Pacheco is getting this ownership. If people like Charger stacks, I don't think that Isaiah Pacheco is going to have this ownership, like whatsoever. Because the Chargers look like they're going to be the highest owned stack, and people do not like playing a running back against their stack, even though it's not the worst thing in the world. This isn't going to hold. I'll bet he comes in at like 15% owned. And if you think that he is going to be a good play, I think you should still play him. And then you can just bring it back with like Chargers options or whatever. Or you can play a Chargers stack against Isaiah Pacheco. That's totally fine too. But I don't think this ownership stands. Gibbs is going to get a lot more ownership. He's probably going to be 30% owned, somewhere around there, especially after the comments from the coach saying that he's going to carry the majority of the load. And then Josh Jacobs, I've seen some people talk him up. But at 7,400, I don't know if that's going to stick, right? He's expensive, and the good stacks this week are expensive. Unless people are really, really like gung-ho about going with cheap stacks. I guess we're going to sort by ownership on stacks. Highest is a Charger stack. Then Green Bay stacks look like they're going to be popular. Wow, Green Bay is going to be chalk. Crazy world we live in. The Green Bay is going to be chalky. I'm surprised that Washington isn't getting more ownership. I mean, they're getting a little bit, but not much. So yeah, I don't think that Josh Jacobs' ownership is going to stand. Maybe he's the pay-up that people go with, but I think it's probably just going to be Kenneth Walker and Jahmyr Gibbs as like the main chalk combo. I could see people going with some Jerome Ford. I can buy that for sure. Rashad White is not going to be popular. People hate playing him. They just think that he's bad. Dante Foreman and Darrynton Evans are probably going to get a little bit more ownership as well. Let's see. Wide receivers. Let's see. Where's ownership on wide receivers? So we got Joshua Palmer. I'll bet he's way higher than that. 4,800. I'll bet he comes in at like 30% owned, 35% owned, something like that. 4,800 is way too cheap for him. But he's good chalk, right? Like, I think that here's the thing. As usual, the answer when it comes to chalk on cheap wide receivers is you should play them in a stack. So if you're stacking the Chargers, you should play Joshua Palmer. If you're stacking the Chiefs, you should play Joshua Palmer. If you are doing a secondary stack with Joshua Palmer and Rashee Rice or Joshua Palmer and Travis Kelce, that's fine. Don't play Joshua Palmer as a one-off. That's pretty much always the way that it goes. You just shouldn't play a cheap wide receiver as a one-off, especially if they're chalk. Cooper Kupp ownership is pretty high. Keenan Allen ownership is pretty high. Yeah, I can buy that. I think Cooper Kupp's going to have plenty of ownership, even at 9,500. Puka Nacua is not going to be 14% owned. I'll bet he's under 10% owned because people don't want to play him while also playing Cooper Kupp. Zay Flowers ownership, that makes sense. Christian Watson, yeah, Green Bay's going to be chalk, pretty much for sure. Wan'Dale Robinson, I could see being much higher or at around 15%. But 3,800, he's pretty good value. So what are we looking at for the best value? Curtis Samuel, pretty hot. That's looking pretty good at 4K. Really, the models really like Washington stacks, so I'm into that. I'm fine with that. And then George Pickens. Again, I think Pittsburgh stacks are good this week. Please don't shoot me in the face for saying that, but I think they are. I think they're pretty good chalk. Pretty good chalk. And then Josh Downs. Surprised not as much ownership on Josh Downs. He looked good last week. And he got the volume, pretty sure. Right? Like, we can go check and see if he got the volume. That's running backs. Josh Downs, week 6. Yeah, I mean, target 16%. 8 out 6. Air yards only 12%. He had 50% of the end zone target. Scored 13 fantasy points. Like, he's been fine. Route participation has been good. Didn't get cut into, really, by anyone. Alec Pierce only had, yeah. I mean, Joshua Downs looks fine. Let's go ahead and take a look at tight ends really quick before we go check out the contest sims. So Travis Kelce, just obviously in a league of his own, but not the best value on the slate. At 8K, like, you're basically dedicating to playing him. It's hard to dedicate to play that. Let's see, ownership. He's also going to be the highest owned. I don't know if dedicating $8,000 in salary to Travis Kelce makes sense unless you are stacking with the Chargers. Travis Kelce is the best bring back on the slate for sure. Probably not the best one-off. Luke Musgraves. Yep, Green Bay, chalk, of course. Check out the best values. Zach Ertz, again, punching us in the face with his fucking presence. It's a running joke that Zach Ertz always projects well, but, like, it's really, really hard to argue with, like, his route participation was really, really good up until week 6, where Trey McBride ended up pushing him on it. So maybe Trey McBride is the guy now. But his target percentage has been fine. His catchable target's been good. He ends up getting some third down targets. Like, it's not the worst, but Trey McBride may start pushing him for time. It's time for Arizona to stop playing in a way that they actually care to play. So Michael Mayer is going to be, I don't know why the ownership projection on Michael Mayer is 2%. Michael Mayer is going to be fucking chalk. Like, he's going to be like 20% owned. I never manually adjust chalk or ownership. I'm going to do that tomorrow. Michael Mayer is going to be giga chalk. There's been a lot of talk on him. His projection is good, basically across the industry. Chicago is bad. Like, at 2,700, he's a really, really good play if he is under 15% owned, but that's a big if. I think he comes in like 20% owned or something like that. All right. Let's take a drink, answer some questions, go check out contest sims. Ooh, also, if you like this hoodie, I'll post a link to it in the Discord so we can go buy it. We'll have merch restocked on the merch site that Margaret has put together for us. Thank you guys so much to those of you who have bought some merch. It means a lot. So if you like this hoodie or if you like this hat, then DM Margaret and let her know that you'd like one. It's going to be up on the site here pretty soon. Let's see. 40-minute solo queue game. Well, fucking shouldn't be playing solo queue, man. That's a mistake. I made a huge mistake playing solo queue today and having 3 people just completely quit out of games. All top laners, by the way. League of Legends, great game. I gave up the Millie lineup. I mean, I hope so. I hope that I won the Millie tomorrow with the Pittsburgh stack. That'd be sick. Wilson, Judy, Sutton. Yeah. Yes and no, I guess. I don't know, man. I don't really like Jerry Jeudy. I don't think the Broncos like Jerry Jeudy. I think the Sutton is good. But I don't think the Broncos like Jerry Jeudy. So I'll have to think about it. Like, if I do end up going with a Denver stack, that's very likely what I go with. If I don't go with that, it's going to be with Greg Dulcich. Just because, like, I don't know. I just really don't like Jerry Jeudy. And yeah, Steve Smith doesn't like Jerry Jeudy, and Jerry he's a fucking beta, dude. Like, the guy's thin-skinned, you know? Just isn't all that great. Michael Wilson projects better than Wendell. Yeah, and I think that's not a bad way to go about it at all. ESPN Fantasy talked about Green Bay specifically. Yeah, I mean, people are going to talk about it. Like, Denver's defense is not good, for sure. But, like, yeah, I don't know. I could see going with Green Bay stack. The problem is, man, if you look at the way that Green Bay played in the last game, I hate that offense. Like, they do not know how to get their players open. It's basically, are they going to throw deep to Christian Watson, or are they going to dump it off to their running back or to the flat? That's it. Like, they barely throw anything over the middle. They don't throw hooks. They don't throw any kind of, like, motion out there. Like, that offense sucks. It sucks. At least Denver, like, I have the upside of thinking that Russell Wilson is going to take some deep shots after they've been set up with something. Like, Sean Payton is not a really, really bad offensive game planner. The Broncos have just had some different issues going on. So I think that this game really, here's the thing, and I'm gonna talk more about Green Bay fucking Denver right now. Here's the thing with that game. Both quarterbacks are playing for their jobs, like in the future, right? If Russell Wilson cannot do well in this spot, I think that they are not going to renew his contract next year. And I think that they go with a rookie, right? Because, if they can't do anything here in a spot against an inexperienced defense and an inexperienced offense and a coach that is playing over his head, that Russell Wilson's not the guy, right? Even if they paid him a lot, they pay him less if they cut him before he is guaranteed money next year. And Green Bay, Jordan Love, you got to do something against this Denver defense, right? If he can't do something against this Denver defense, even though he started strong, he's shown really, really bad habits in the last couple of games. And some of it's been luck. I think he's looked fine, but it hasn't been great last couple of games. So he's kind of playing for his future too. So this is a really important game for both these sides, I think. Jerry Jeudy is playing for a new contract and a trade partner, and Cortland Sutton is good, and I think is going to just benefit if Russell Wilson is playing well, right? There's Christian Watson is good, Dobbs is good, Jalen Reed is good. There are good pieces on both of these sides. So I think both of these quarterbacks, this is kind of if these quarterbacks don't produce, they don't get contracts next year, right? They end up on some other squad. Russell Wilson ends up retiring and becoming a Christian TikTok star. Jordan Love ends up retiring and working at Whataburger. I don't know what the fuck they do, but it feels like if they don't do well in this game, they're just shot next year. So I think this is a really important game for both of them. Anyway, I should stop talking about that fucking game. I really should. Anyway, we're going to jump into contest sensor. So, let's see. Let's start with QB exposures. The highest edge is on Kenny Pickett. Man, I am talking all about Green Bay, Denver, and fucking Pittsburgh. How much money do I want to lose tomorrow? All of it? Every single cent that I own? This is terrible. I'm gonna have an awful time tomorrow. Kenny Pickett, highest edge tomorrow, and then Matthew Stafford. That makes sense. Russell Wilson is up here. Josh Dobbs is up here. The least edge is on Geno Smith and Josh Allen. Josh Allen just shows up basically none. These expensive quarterbacks are just not showing up. You need to use a value quarterback this week is what the Sims are telling us. The edge is on these really cheap quarterbacks, and the negative edge is on the really expensive ones. So that's what it comes down to. And not playing chalk Geno Smith. As far as edge on running backs, Rachaad White, best edge, that makes sense. Paydirt models have loved Rachaad White this year. The volume has been good, just has had bad touchdown regression, basically. And then Josh Jacobs, Brian Robinson, and Isaiah Pacheco, all positive values. When we look at negative values, Bijan Robinson, Saquon Barkley, Austin Eckler, again, expensive running backs. The cheap running backs are much better edge here. 5,100, 5,800, 6,100, 5,100. These guys are good. And then Josh Jacobs, who has a really good projection and role, he's probably the right expensive guy to play. Whereas Jahmyr Gibbs, he's fine. His projected ownership and exposure is not that bad. But 7,300, 8,100, 8,600, you shouldn't be playing these expensive running backs tomorrow. Let's go ahead and take a look at edge on wide receivers. Puka Nacua is the best. And then George Pickens, more Pittsburgh. Amari Cooper, that's an interesting one. Cortland Sutton, Marquise Brown, and Deontay Johnson, another Pittsburgh guy. So we're stacking Pittsburgh. Negative edge, Joshua Palmer, that makes sense. Again, don't play Joshua Palmer as a one-off. Wan'Dale Robinson, that makes sense. Don't play Wan'Dale Robinson as one-off. And then DK Metcalf, Christian Watson, Green Bay chalk is shaky. And then Michael Pittman. Tight ends, man, a lot of positive edge here. Positive edge on Zach Ertz, Cole Kmet, David Njoku, Logan Thomas, Dawson Knox. Again, cheap guys. And then just don't play Travis Kelce. There is a trend here, okay? If you are planning on spending up at a position, because look, so when we're looking at all this, the expensive guys, if we're sorting by negative edge, the expensive guys are pretty much showing up, right? Expensive quarterbacks, no go. Expensive running backs, no-go. Expensive tight end, no-go. The only one where there's edge is on the expensive wide receivers. So think about that, right? This is a lesson to learn. On a slate like today, where there's negative edge on everything but wide receivers, that means that the best way to build is by stacking the expensive wide receivers, right? The Puka Nacua, the Cooper Kupp, the Keenan Allen, the Tyler Lockett, right? Like these guys who are expensive. That's the way that you should be building. You should be looking to stack with the Ram stacks, or you should be looking to stack with the Charger stacks, or you should be looking to stack with these expensive mid-tier wide receivers and not spending your money on running backs. The running backs on the high end are not that much more valuable than the running backs on the low end. The quarterbacks on the high end do not have that much more upside than the quarterbacks on the low end. Make sure that you are allocating your salary correctly. Some weeks, we have a lot of value at wide receiver, where then you can spend up at quarterback or running back or tight end. Some weeks, we have a lot of value at tight end, where you can spend up at the other positions. This week, we have a lot of value at quarterback. We have okay value at running back. So we want to spend up at wide receiver. Typically, it's never going to tell you to spend up at tight end and defense. That's just the way that it goes. But when you're building out lineups, if you're using Travis Kelce, who is, again, we're going to take a look. He's a negative 13% edge. It's still fine to play him if you pair him with Puka Nacua, who cancels it out. Or if you pair him with Rachaad White, who cancels it out, right? Or with Kenny Pickett, who cancels it out. You just got to make sure that you are canceling out the negative leverage with the positive leverage. So keep in mind where you're allocating your money. This week, you should be allocating your money towards wide receiver and paying down at quarterback or at running back or at tight end. Find a way to pay up at wide receiver. That's the way that things should go. So wanted to give that little roster construction tip there. Let's take a look at defenses really quick. Don't play the Giants. You should play the Patriots. Again, like cheap defenses, this is always what the contest sim spits out. That's a feature, not a bug. So now that we have gone through that, let's take a look really quick at quarterbacks. So we like Pickett stacks. We like Rams stacks, and we like Denver, Chargers. I mean, there's a lot of stacks that we can go with. Let's go ahead and go to the stack finder here. We're going to go QB plus 2. We can go full slate run here. And we're just going to go ahead and see what it spits out for us. So the top overall is going to be Ram stacks, and then Buffalo. And then we do have a Detroit stack. We do have a Detroit stack, and we do have a Pittsburgh stack, right? Kenny Pickett, George Pickens, Deontay Johnson. I love this stack this week. And then we end up with some Chicago. I'm not going to play fucking Chicago stacks, but I understand why it's here. More Detroit, and then a lot of Pittsburgh and New England. A lot of New England. Man, yeah, because New England has no ownership, right? So based on this, what are we missing here that shows up here? So when we look at this, we'll go by medians. So we have Rams, we have Buffalo. Both of those show up here, Rams, Buffalo. What we don't have is Chargers in Kansas City. So that game looks overowned. And then we do have some Detroit. We do have some Tampa Bay. And we do have some Pittsburgh. The one that doesn't show up is Baltimore. So what we're really missing is Chargers, Chiefs, and Baltimore. If you go with a Baltimore plus 1, like if you were to go QB plus 1, I'll bet the Baltimore stacks show up. They do not. I was wrong. I've been proven wrong. Still, QB plus 1, Rams, Buffalo, Detroit, Pittsburgh. These are kind of some really, really good stacks to go with. It doesn't surprise me that Buffalo ends up looking like a better stack than the Chargers. Mostly because, they project just as well and they have lower ownership. Detroit is a really interesting stack. Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. Mike Evans nuked week 2. Detroit stacks. Nobody is stacking Detroit. Look at this ownership. Combined ownership of 14%. Pittsburgh stacks. Kenny Pickett, George Pickens, Deontay Johnson. So based off of this, if you're going to pay up, you should be going with Rams or Buffalo. If you're going to pay down, you should be going with Pittsburgh or Tampa Bay, right? Those are kind of the options. Going with Rams, Buffalo, Pittsburgh, Detroit, or Pittsburgh, Tampa Bay. We didn't see any Green Bay here. We didn't see any Denver here. Green Bay doesn't show up because they're too high owned. Denver doesn't show up because they project too low. So important to be reticent of all of those things. Then let's go ahead and go to the optimizer really quick. And let's go with a round robin run here. A round robin run, if you have not used the optimizer, does a optimization for every single stack. So let's go +2. Let's go ahead and do a 1 bring back here. Actually, let's go with a 2 bring back. Let's see what the best stacks are with that. 49K, yep, that's fine. Full slate run, yep. All right, go and optimize that. So let's see what we get if we go overload stacks. Like what is the projection for every single overload stack? And then we'll just sort by projection. So Stafford with Puka Nacua, George Pickens, and Deontay Johnson is the top overall. And then Pickett. This Rams game, man. Both of these have higher projections by a long shot than the second tier. The second tier is Joshua Dobbs, Tyler Bagent, Brian Hoyer, and fucking Geno Smith. That's so gross, right? So this game, man, this Kenny Pickett, Josh Jacobs, Rashad White, Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, George Pickens, Michael Mayer, Deontay Johnson, Chargers defense. That's the fucking winner, bros. And broettes, right? If there are females watching the stream, I appreciate you too. I wish that there were more women in the DFS industry. I really do. I don't know what we have to do to get more women in the DFS industry, but I wish there were more women that play DFS. Especially because, like, there's the Taylor Swift thing. Anyway, fucking Pittsburgh stacks, dude. That's hot this week. I'm super into that. So anyway. Let's do some final thoughts. Let's close this thing out. So, stacks that I'm super interested in. Rams, Buffalo, Tampa Bay, and Pittsburgh. That's those are the ones that I'm super interested in. Outside of that, I'm fine with stacking the Chargers and the Chiefs game. I'm fine with stacking the Green Bay and the Denver game. I'm fine with those. If I were to MME, I would have them as like my 5th and 6th stack. But for the most part, either too expensive or too high owned, whatever. I probably will not be playing them. As far as chalk goes, let's go ahead and go back into the range of outcomes here and just kind of take a look at where ownership is. I don't really see that many bad chalk options. I think that Isaiah Pacheco is not going to come in at 25% owned. Kenneth Walker is really good chalk. Fine with that. If you don't want to play Kenneth Walker, you should play a Seattle stack. Seattle's going to score points. So Jahmyr Gibbs, probably fine chalk. I don't mind that. Catch the balls out of the backfield, should have the majority of the work if the coach isn't being an asshole. I don't really see a lot of bad chalk. This seems like a week where you can kind of play the chalk. And the reason why you can play the chalk and like the reason why we don't have a Joshua Kelly this week or we don't have a Pat Freiermuth this week is that like the totals are low and a lot of the chalky stacks I just don't really have that much interest in, right? Like I like a Rams and a Buffalo stack. I don't love a Charger stack. I don't love the Seattle stack. I don't love a Tampa Bay stack. So it's like, if I'm going to play a Pittsburgh stack, why wouldn't I just play Kenneth Walker? Right? Like, why wouldn't I just play Jahmyr Gibbs? That's fine with me. So I'm on the lower owned stacks this week, so I'm probably going to be fine with most of the chalk. Like, as I go down the list, the worst piece of chalk is going to be Joshua Palmer or Christian Watson. And both of those guys, like, if I go with a Baltimore stack, or if I go with a Kansas City stack or a Chargers stack, I'll use Joshua Palmer. If I go with the Green Bay or Denver stack, I'll use Christian Watson. I'm not interested in those guys outside of that, right? So I guess what I will say is if you're not stacking the Chargers or the Chiefs, you should not play Joshua Palmer. If you're not stacking Green Bay or Denver, you shouldn't play Christian Watson. There's really no reason to. But the rest of the chalk, I think, looks fine. Like Walker, Pacheco, Gibbs, Josh Jacobs, Cooper Kupp, Travis Kelce, Keenan Allen, like whatever, man. Zay Flowers looks fine. I'm probably fine with the chalk this week. So all that being said, just to wrap things up here, we like the Rams, we like Buffalo, we like Tampa Bay, we like Pittsburgh. We're okay with Denver. We're okay with a Chargers or Chiefs stack, so long as you are reticent of the chalk that you're putting around it. I think that it's really important to spend your money at wide receiver this week and not spend money at running back unless you have a really cheap quarterback. Like if you have a really cheap quarterback and really cheap tight end, you can spend on one running back slot, a Josh Jacobs or a Bijan Robinson or Saquon Barkley, but not two of them. You're going to want to have a mix. And then finally, this week, when you have weeks like this where the cheap kind of like what Blender would call vomit stacks end up looking like they're probably good plays, just be okay with losing money. This is a week where it's going to be really, really volatile. I think that GPP scores are probably going to be really high, and you want a lot of volatility in your lineups, right? You don't want to be eating chalk and trying to have the highest scoring, highest chalky lineup, right? You don't want to be having a Chief stack where you eat all of the chalk at running back and wide receiver as well. You want to have a Pickett or a Denver stack or like a Baltimore stack, like these stacks that are lower owned, where you have a lot of upside at the other positions and you can spend a lot of money on your wide receivers where you can get a really good floor. So this looks like a really good week. I'm excited about it. That's going to be it for me. So as usual, I will plug things now. If you want to leave the stream, you can. If you don't, then you're going to get bombarded with some things about subscribing over at Paydirt. Obviously, I think that Paydirt is fantastic. I think you should go subscribe there. If you want a day pass for tomorrow, just check out the models. You can get that. A day pass exists. It's $5. If you want to get a full year pass because you think I'm awesome, you can do that. That's available for NFL. And we're going to have NBA up tomorrow as well, NBA packages. I think you should get the All Access $40 per month subscriber because it includes every single sport and it's only $5 more than each individual monthly sport. So I appreciate all the support. I appreciate everybody giving me the time of day and letting me have this job where I can make medium bucks giving out fantasy advice. But thank you guys so much. If you have any questions, you can come find me in the Discord. Again, a link to that is on the site. You can go here. You can click this. It will take you to the Discord. It's free to join. But I'm going to get off. I'm going to go eat some dinner. And then we're going to get ready to win a lot of money with Pittsburgh stacks tomorrow. I have decided that's my identity this week, and I'm sticking to it. So thank you guys so much. I appreciate you. Hit me up in the Discord if you got questions, and I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Peace.